I'm the mentor trainer within Texas United Realty. I hope everybody can see the screen and can see my presentation. So we're going to go ahead and get started. This webinar is focusing on how to fill in the sellers and buyers net sheets and also estimating closing costs within Matrix. Many of you guys are going to be encountering quite a bit actually where the seller or the buyer are always asking you questions like, well, how much am I going to net if I sell this house at a certain price? Or buyers are always going to be asking, well, how much is closing costs going to be? Of course, I always recommend them getting that information from the lender, but you can always do an estimate as well. So we'll be looking at that. We're going to be doing some demo examples of it. And then lastly, we're going to be focusing on using calculator within Matrix as well. It's got a pretty good amortization for loans. And again, you can ask me questions if you like while we're doing the presentation. So in order for us to look at how the seller's net sheet works, we're going to be doing this demo example where there's a seller that's looking to sell his house. He wants to know about how much net profit he would make at closing, and you know, we're going to be listing it for $175,000. It's going to be either cash or mortgage. Can somebody please put that on mute? It looks like Shaniqua. If you can put that on mute, please. And also, just to prepare for this seller's net sheet, things that we're going to be asking the seller is, you know, what's their mortgage balance, property taxes, HOA transfer fees, mortgage interest. Also, we're going to be focusing on the title insurance premium, which we have an example how to access that, and I'll present that in a moment. And also what's important is if there's any liens or back child support, because this does affect the outcome of the net proceeds as well. Sometimes it feels like you're becoming intrusive with the seller by asking these kind of questions, but it's very necessary. In particular, you know, if they owe a lot of back child support, that's going to have to be paid off when they sell their house, which is going to reduce the net proceeds. Also, if their mortgage balance is really high, probably because they did a reverse mortgage or something else that they did, that's also they might even be upside down as well. So it's important to look at those things. Okay, so invoking the seller's net sheet, what you do is you run the seller's net sheet within Matrix under Finance. Click on Finance and then the hard seller's net sheet. So let's go ahead and do that. I always like to start at the home screen as well. So let's go to the home. And then what we're going to do is here we click on Finance, hard seller's net sheet. I hear some background noise. If you can please put your phone on mute, that would be real helpful. So we invoke that. My internet is kind of slow, looks like, but should be coming up here. So here's the seller's net sheet. Here's what it looks like. And the way you just start filling it in, put in the name of the user, of the person. Here we can just say it's John Seller. And you can type in the zip code. So what I did is I picked a house that's nearby where I live. And we're going to be listing that one. So the owner wants to be aware of what the net proceeds are. Now another thing is you have to actually pick on a closing month, even though you don't have a contract at the moment. Just kind of do a guess, you can say. Like right now, we're in the month of October, so you can just say, well, it's going to be closing November 15th. Usually, when it's a mortgage involved, there's always about 45 days that you calculate for closing. And then we said it was going to be a conventional selling price. We said it was going to be $175,000 for this particular example. And then the outstanding loan, he told us that it was he still owes the bank $56,000. Of course, this is just pretend. And then his annual interest rate is 4.5%. Of course, this information you have to grab from the seller. There's nothing that you can do as far as guess how much he owes and what have you. And then the commission is going to be 6%. And you can either type 6% or you can type in the actual value if he's actually paying a fixed amount. And then this particular row here where it says pay off CD, lien, home improvements, here's where you would put like back child support or something like that, because that's considered a lien. Now, one thing that's critical for you guys to be aware of is the annual property tax. That's something that you need to plug in. That's really critical, especially in some particular areas. The property taxes are very high. And how to find out how to do that research as far as the property taxes, you have to go into Matrix. And then, for example, we're going to put here the address of the property. Now, I normally like to use the speed bar. This is called the speed bar here. And I'm going to look up this property. Now, this property is already listed, so it's going to find it. But I'm going to show you another way of whenever the property is not listed at all or has ever been listed, where you can find that information as well. So it's going to pull up this property. And let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. I got the wrong address here. It's 11803 Rolling Stream. Okay. So in order to find out where to find the taxes, you can go into MLS listing. Now, one way to find out is if you go all the way to the bottom of the MLS, and they'll tell you about the taxes. Now, in this particular area, it doesn't show that. But what I normally like to do is I like to click on the tax account number right here in the center. It says tax account number. This is a hyperlink. This is the actual account number for this particular property. You can click on that, and what it does is it opens up the property description, which gives you a lot of detail regarding that property as far as when it was built, the legal description, taxes, if it's in the mud, a lot of detail. It's called the property detail report. So here I like to go and scroll down, and you'll see here where it says tax year. I look for 2017, which is the most current year, and I look at the total tax that that particular owner paid for 2017, and it's $3,913. So then I go back to my seller's net sheet, and that's what I type in here, $3,913. Now I have a more accurate annual property taxes. Okay. Now that another way to find out about the annual property tax is you can also go into Realist. I don't know if you guys have done that before, but sometimes when you can't find the property within Matrix MLS, you have to go into Public Records and click on Realist Tax, and then that's going to load another program that's linked to Matrix, but it's also linked to the appraisal district and the tax rolls and what have you. It's a little slow, but it eventually gets the job done. And in this particular program, it's very useful because it also provides you like even the dimensions of the property. But this is also useful whenever there's a property that you're trying to list and you're in a listing appointment and they've never ever it's never been on MLS, and you're going to have to use Realist to find out additional information like taxes and what have you. And also it gives you the name of the owners as well. One thing about Realist is that it's very slow, so you have to have patience. As you can see on my screen. There's no way to speed this up. Also, I wish it would allow me to stay logged in. Sometimes I'll leave it running and then all of a sudden there's a timeout feature and it kicks you back out. So there's no way to leave it running. And we're still waiting. Here it goes. It's starting to load finally. That's the only thing about Realist that is so slow. But Realist allows you to search information and a lot of detail for the property itself. They actually have a training class for Realist I think it's about 4 hours long, because it's pretty powerful once you get it loaded. I think it's finally coming up. There it goes. Starting to refresh the screen. So Realist has a quick search, and here's where you would type in the address of the property, and then it will give you a similar information as far as the tax records. Anyway, this is going a little too slow, so we're going to jump. So going back to the seller's net sheet. So now you type in the tax information. Now the title policy, this is a big question that always comes up, and you're always going to encounter it, in particular on the seller side. Title policy insurance, that's what's used to whenever you're at a closing, and the seller typically is the one that pays for it at the closing, and this protects both the buyer and the sellers for any title discrepancies. This seller net sheet is pretty neat because it automatically calculates it for you. You don't have to worry about that, but there is a website you can go to look at the cost of the premiums for the title insurance policy, and I'm loading it right now. And it's under tdi.texas.gov, and it's the basic premium rates, and depending on the sales price of the house, it determines the basic premium that the title companies are going to charge you. And this is all Texas, so it doesn't matter where you close at whatever title company you're closing at, they're all charged the same for the title insurance premium. Now this chart only goes up to $100,000, but if the house is higher, there's a formula that you use, and we'll look at that formula and momentarily. I have a slide just for that. Okay. Other things that you're going to be typing in the seller's net sheet. Some of them are already pre-filled, like this doc prep fee. You can just leave that alone. Home warranty. I don't know if you guys have been hearing that normally sellers pay for up to $500 in home warranty. This is a warranty that is provided to the buyer, and normally, typically, is paid by the seller. And this is a home warranty for the appliances that and the air conditions and other things, depending on what the buyer chose for the service. But that's typically about $500. There's some other fees like the appraiser you don't really mess with. Inspections, you can just leave that alone. The escrow fee. Now, some of the title companies, well, a lot of the title companies charge different prices depending on who you use. The escrow fee is actually the charge of the title company to provide a service for the closing. Normally they charge, $350 or $375 or $400 or $450, and I usually like to type in $450 because I always like to type in the worst case scenario. And the $450 is split. Well, it's really $900, but the buyer pays $450 and the seller pays $450. So it's really $900 that the title company charges for their to provide their service for the closing. Other things that I like to work on and fill in is let me see if underwriter, these kind of fees. I tend to just put like $25 on each one of these. I like to kind of put in some numbers here because I'd rather be over than under whenever I produce this report to my sellers. HOA's transfer fee. Normally, whenever you're working on deals, you're going to see things like there's a $150 transfer fee that the buyer is going to pay first, and then the seller will pay the rest. But I just normally just put $150 here just to be safe. Everything else, I think that's all. I'm kind of looking at my notes to see if there's anything else that I normally put in here. I think that's all there is that I kind of mess with. Let's see. And there's this miscellaneous cost. There's some other costs that you can put in here if you find out about certain things during the negotiation phase. I'm trying to see if there's anything else. Escrow fee we got $450. Application fee, we'll just leave that alone. Oh, this homeowners association fee. This is whenever there's properties in a homeowners association fee, they sometimes charge an annual fee. Like this particular area is $350 a year, so I would just put $350 there. And then it's going to be prorated between the buyer and the seller. And let's see if I have anything else here in my notes. Nope. Another thing is I'm trying to see if there's a section in here. Okay, seller paid buyer costs. Now this field right here you're going to use if for some reason, when you're talking to your seller, the seller tells you, hey, I'm willing to pay up to $3,000 towards buyer closing costs. If they ask, of course, we're not going to offer it, but if they do ask, I'm willing to do that. Or there might be an allowance for carpet or an allowance for some kind of repair. You can already put this number in here. If they're allowing $2,000 for replacement of carpet, you can put the number 2,000 on here, and then it'll be part of the closing costs. I think that's about it. So we're going to just click calculate. And once you click calculate, it's going to run all through the calculations, the information that we provided, and then it'll generate a worksheet. So here you are. It has your name, you know, who the seller is, zip codes. It's got, you know, the commissions at the top. It's got, you know, estimated closing date, you know, what type of loan, and pretty much everything you kind of typed in. Okay. So sales price is 175, and we have a loan. Oh, it says there's a loan 560,000. That's wrong. So let's fix that real quick. I put 560,000. It should have been 56,000. So that's an error on my part. No wonder it didn't look good. So now I can recalculate this again. Looking at everything else, looks good. Press calculate. So now when it calculates, it should come out a little bit better. So now here's the actual estimated closing. Keep in mind to always repeat this disclosure that the following data is for estimation purposes only, and the accuracy of the figures is not guaranteed. So make sure that you repeat that verbally as well when you're speaking to the seller or the buyer. So now, if we sell the house for $175,000, we have a loan of $56,000. The estimated net proceeds is $101,696. So that's just an estimate. So at closing, that's about how much the seller should net after we close. Now we have a space in here for seller signatures. This is real useful whenever you're at a listing appointment, or even if you're going to redo this. So for example, if you have a contract offer that's received, and you know, let's just say it's like even a lower price, instead of 175, it's 170,000. It's always good to run a new seller's net sheet and then have them like initial it or sign it, you know, with a date, just so they don't really come back to you going, well, I thought I was going to get, you know, 115,000, and you're like, no, remember we discussed it. It was about 101. So at least you got proof. So that's pretty much how to do a seller's net sheet. Any questions before we move on? Okay. So I wanted to focus on the title insurance premium. As I mentioned, if you go to the website, also Lisa's mentees, they have, I believe, a section in there about title insurance premiums. Also on my side, my students have similar access to this, but there's a website that you can also access. But let's just, since this website only produces up to $100,000 house, in this particular example we're doing 175,000. So how do we calculate the title insurance premium for it? When the chart that we're trying to use here, only it stops at 100,000. Trying to get this going here. All right, let's see, it doesn't want to go down here. Anyway, so it stops at 100,000. So how do we do that calculation? So the way to do that calculation is the sales price is 175,000. You subtract 100,000, which equals to 75,000. You multiply 75,000 times this formula of 00554. That's coming from the title insurance rules. It becomes $415.50, and then you just add 875. It's always going to be 875 plus 415.50 equals to 1290.50, and that's how much the total premium is going to be, $1,290.50. So if it was 180,000, or if it was 165, it's the same formula. It's still 00554, and it's still 875. these two numbers do not change. Okay, I hope that doesn't sound really difficult, but I'm sure Lisa and I can help you out if you still have questions. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to look at buyer closing cost estimates. Again, you click on finance, and this time we're going to select buyer closing costs. Now I'm sure many of you guys are already starting to interact with clients, and they're telling you, oh, how much is the closing cost? Is there a formula? You know, I always hear that a lot. Is there a formula that you can give us? Now, the best thing to do is always have them contact their lender. The lender is going to give them a better, more closer estimate. And usually the lenders will provide a good faith estimate. I don't know if you guys have been hearing about that, but a good faith estimate is more, it's mandatory by lenders to produce that to the buyers. So like that, they don't have any surprises. Okay, so in order to invoke the buyer closing costs, you click on finance, click on buyer closing costs, and this time we're going to go into the buyer side instead of the seller side. This is real helpful whenever you're dealing with buyers and they're kind of getting ready to submit an offer. Of course, again, I reiterate for them to go to a lender and get the information. But you can always run this as well and kind of give them a ballpark. So again, you fill it out with the name and then the address. We're going to use the same address. Same zip code. And the purchase price is going to be, the closing, again, is going to be November 15. Like I mentioned before, I usually calculate about 45 days from the present day for closing, if it's a mortgage. If it's cash, it's 30 days. And then 175,000. Now down payment, you notice this is a little different. The other seller's net sheet was talking more about commissions, but here it's talking about down payment. So how much down payment are they going to, is the buyer going to give? You can put in a dollar value, or you can actually put in a percent as well. So I'm just going to put 20,000. It's going to be conventional. Now we're going to skip the assumable because it's not an assumable. Now the interest rate. A lot of us go, well, what should we put in here? I really don't know what to put as far as an interest rate. One thing that you guys need to become familiar with is the pre-approval letter. The pre-approval letter has a lot of the answers. I have an example here of a pre-approval letter that I just modified for this class. And the pre-approval letter is going to produce the information that will help you fill that out. So in this pre-approval letter, it says that, you know, the purchase price of 175. It even says how much down payment they're going to do, which is 5%. You're going to see a lot of numbers like this, what this means is you grab 100% minus 95, which is 5%. So they're going to be putting 5% in this particular pre-approval letter. And then it also gives them an estimate about monthly payments. But here it says APR is 4.5, it's a 30-year, and it's conventional. So the pre-approval letters will have that information. So it's always helpful to read it briefly and find out what the pre-approval is for that particular person. Okay. So now we can go back to our estimate here. We're going to type in 4.5%. It's 30-year loan. Another thing is the homeowner's insurance. That's an additional cost. That one you can't really can plug in a number because it's better that the buyer does research and also the lender can also give you an estimate. I normally like to put in $1,500, $1,500 per year. This is what that means per year of homeowners insurance. It's kind of like buying a car. But you know, the lender can give you a better, more accurate number, or the buyer itself, because the buyer, there's some smart buyers out there that do quotes, and they'll tell you, oh, Fernando, it's really $1,350 a year. Anyway, I always like to use just the 1,500. Flood insurance. If the property is located in a flood zone, that's extra insurance. Homeowners insurance and flood insurance are not the same thing. Particularly now with Hurricane Harvey, that happened last year. So flood insurance is an additional cost. So if you're dealing with a house that has been flooded before and now is marked as a flood, in the floodplain, you're gonna ask the lender or the buyer how much that flood insurance costs, and then you can plug that number in. Okay. All these other things you can leave alone. That's if you want to be more specific about PMI insurance and all that, but I usually like to leave that alone at the moment. And then the tax rate, I believe we had said it was $3,913. Okay, and it automatically plugs in the other numbers like property tax reserves. That's already an automatic thing that it does. Okay, so the appraisal fee. This system usually puts $350, but the appraisal really are like $395, close to $400, and I've seen some of them even up to $700 for the appraisal. So I mean, I'll stick with 400, but you can do 500, 600, but I've seen like 395. I'm sorry, is it 495? I think it's 495 that I've seen. Application fees and all that, usually lenders don't charge that. Monthly homeowners associations, this is if it's in a condo or something that they pay the HOA dues every month. So if you're messing with the condo, that probably would be the field that you would use. The survey, this is kind of low, conservative, $325. I've seen surveys go all the way to $700, so it depends on what it is that you're buying. Like if you're buying like 2 acres of land, the survey is not going to be no $325. I'll guarantee you that. It'll probably be about $800. But it depends on what property it is. Processing fee, whenever I see things that are just zero, I usually just plug in $25 just to be safe. Loan origination fee, 1%. Lenders usually charge 1%. They may charge 0.75. They may charge 0.5. Depends on what lender we're using. But typically we just leave it at 1%. And usually this is their commission, if you want to know what that is. All these calculations are already done for us. Now here's his title insurance. Now here, title insurance is typically paid by the seller. So really you should make this a 0. Okay, because title insurance is not paid by the buyer, hardly ever paid by the buyer. Now you're going to be experiencing some cases where there's a negotiation between the buyer and the seller where they're going to split the costs of the title insurance half and half. So there you would then plug in a number. The buyer's home warranty plan, again, if the seller's not buying, because they typically pay $500, if the seller's not doing it, then the buyer can buy one here, and you can just type that in. As far as the HOA transfer fees, typically they're 150s. I've seen up to $250. So it depends. The MLS sometimes will tell you that information. I'm looking. Oh, the settlement fee. I wish they would have called this an escrow fee because that's what this is. Here it says 250. I always like to change that to 450 because that's how much. Like I don't know if you recall when I said that on the seller side it pays 450, the buyer pays 450, which is equals to $900. That's how much the title companies will charge or less for processing and executing the transaction. Let's see if I have anything else. Oh, I think if let's see, I think that's all I have to do here. Yeah, and I think we're pretty much it. So we're ready to calculate. So we click on calculate. So keep in mind this is now the buyer side of the calculation. And as you guys are selling to buyers, you're going to become very, very proficient on this because you're probably going to have to generate it quite often where you become a pro. Okay, so now we got the name, the closing date November 15. Of course, this is all estimates. Again, keep in mind that full disclosure about, hey, this is just an estimate purpose only. The house, $175,000, $20,000 down, and so estimated total cash required. Let's see. So their cash that they need to bring to closing is $26,688.75, and that should be the estimate for that. Because remember, they're bringing $155,000 for the loan. The loan amount is going to be $155 at 4.5% interest. We're talking about the cash that they have to bring at closing. Remember, they're bringing They said they were going to bring $20,000 down, plus all the rest of the closing, which is about $6,688. It becomes $26,688 with 75 cents. Another thing that lenders sometimes do is they'll have this, they call it PITA, which is principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. And they like to keep at least a reserve, sometimes up to 2 months. So there might be some additional money there that needs to be held. Again, you can have the buyer sign this if you wish. Because sometimes there's a lot of houses that you show, and I don't think you want to do one on each house, especially if you show about 10 houses. But at least, you know, the one that they're serious about, they can at least work on this particular buyer closing estimate. Okay, let's go back to our presentation. Make sure we have everything. I know these worksheets are kind of intimidating, especially for new agents that are they're not sure what to plug in, but it's going to be practice and practice and practice, of course. And once you get the first one done, then you can always use that as a template. Okay. All right. So I'm going to get ready to talk about something else. Does anybody have any questions between the seller net or the buyer net sheets? Okay. So now there's going to be a question that you're going to be asked by your buyers about the monthly payment, and some kind of amortization, like how much are they going to be paying every month, for 30 years. There's another here under finance. It's called a calculator / amortization. And you can just go ahead and invoke that. It's a pretty neat tool that you can use, and it helps your buyers as well look at the full picture of where their interest goes and their principal goes and what have you. It's got a lot of information here, but the one that I usually use is this: how much will my fixed rate mortgage payment be? So you can just click on that. And then it goes into a financial calculator. And here's where you would type in. So for example, we're using the same example that we started with, the $175,000 house. And we're doing $20,000 in down payment. $30 years, and the interest was the APR is 4.5. And then I'm going to say show payment schedule, which is pretty neat because once you click on compute, it's going to compute all this information, and it's going to provide a table of what it looks like with the insurance and the interest. I'm sorry, the principal and the insurance. Let me rephrase that again. The principal and the interest. Okay, so it says home price $175, $20,000 down, payment amount $785, total payments, total financing $127,000 by the time they get to the 30th year, and then here's the table, the payment schedule. Now keep in mind, this does not include the house insurance nor the taxes. In order to add that, you would have to grab, like for example, if it's $4,000 in taxes, you would have to do 4,000 divided by 12 and then add it to the 787. And then the house insurance, if it's $1,500 a year, again you divide that 1,500 divided by 12 and then add it to this amount. Then you would get the full picture. Okay. Let's see what else is in the. Okay, so a couple tips. It is recommended to provide the seller's net sheet to the seller and have them sign it. That way there's not, oh, this miscommunication regarding the net proceeds. Also, you can update the seller's net sheet, with different versions as you receive contracts during the negotiation phases. Also, on the buyer closing costs worksheet, this is strictly an estimate. It's best if they get the estimate from the lender, because the lender knows a little bit more about their specifics, as far as total closing costs. But you can still provide a buyer closing cost worksheet. And again, disclaimer, this is just an estimate purpose only. Because they think that they can just talk to us and skip the lender side, and that should not be the case. Okay. So, okay, now I can open up for questions. See if anybody has any questions regarding the seller's net sheet or the buyers. You just got to get used to it again. Also, the title insurance premium, like I mentioned before, here's the formula that you can use if it's above 100,000. And you can download it at a website also. Also, when you go to title companies, they also have like little booklets, little handouts of this worksheet, of these premium chart, and you can carry it with you as well if you need to. I'm trying to see if there's anything else that I can talk about. Again, when you're preparing for the worksheets, you need to look at mortgage balances, property taxes, transfer fees, mortgage and interest. When you're in matrix, let's see if we can. Okay. When you're in matrix, you'll have information regarding the HOA fees as well. I don't think this one will have it, but it's typically in the bottom area. Let me spell stream. I really like this speed bar here because it allows me to find properties real fast. But I'm ready to wrap it up if anybody else doesn't have any questions. And again, we have this session recorded for future playback. And again, my name is Fernando with Texas United Realty. And I do appreciate your time. Thank you very much.